Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review The Tragedy of Macbeth. This is the newest film from Joel Coen, but not Ethan Coen, and it stars Denzel Washington as Macbeth, Frances McDormand as Lady Macbeth. The first thing that you should probably know about this movie is that even though you have all these exciting talents from the film world, when you sit down and you watch the movie, it's like, this is hardcore Shakespeare. While Joel Coen is really doing a lot of cool stuff with the visuals, the dialogue here is Shakespearean English, which a lot of people have a hard time with, myself included, to be honest. So I was watching this movie, not really sure what people were saying a lot of the time. I kind of got into the rhythm of things and I got the gist of things. But I think that will be the biggest challenge for audiences, is basically how much do you like Shakespeare? How much do you vibe with his dialogue? But even so, I found that I really liked this movie anyway, even in moments where I'm kind of lost in what exactly is being said with the dialogue. The performances are extremely compelling, and the atmosphere, the black and white cinematography, the minimalist production design was keeping me more than engaged throughout the entire thing.
With Shakespeare adaptations, I feel like it's just not enough to film a stage play and rely mainly on the actors to deliver it in a compelling way for the screen. A really boring film would just be one where the blocking is pretty standard. You get a classic comfy period feel with lavish costumes, and I like that they did not go for that in this film. Between the production design and the lighting, this was almost surreal. I love that they made this exist in a space that doesn't seem to mirror the real world. There's the self-awareness of it being a play and existing as a play. I would say, given that this is just Shakespeare dialogue, like that's definitely a barrier for me. And it probably prevented me from loving this film rather than really liking and respecting it. But overall, I was just really happy because in an adaptation, you're just looking to see what it brings visually to the world of the play, and there was a lot of attention paid to that. I will say that the most compelling part I thought was the contemplation of the first series of murders and seeing Macbeth struggling with that, and Lady Macbeth sort of like praying to the spirits to possess her with ability to kill. I felt this ethereal quality come through, and I got this dreamy existential feeling.
Yeah, Joel Coen is really highlighting the darker, more surreal aspects of the play. I mean, the world of Macbeth is one with witches and people having visions, so it felt like Joel Coen actually realized Shakespeare's vision in an even more true way than if someone were to adapt it in a straightforward way, where it's just a bunch of people walking around like this with their swords and like it looks like the King's Speech. This feels almost more true to the colors of Macbeth. I feel like in a lot of Shakespeare adaptations, the delivery of the dialogue is a little bit like winky. It's like, look, I'm saying this in a modern way so that you, the audience, can understand it in a modern way. It didn't feel like it was trying to water anything down for people who were less likely to be wrapped up in Shakespeare. The black and white cinematography is absolutely beautiful, and the minimalist production design, like the way that the light comes through the windows in a very contrasted, jagged way, is definitely reminiscent of German expressionism. What also stood out was how empty these rooms were. Like, they are not lavishly decorated. Everything feels very barren. Of course, the iconic mist that every adaptation seems to use a little differently. It's kind of like this ever-present white fog.
I like how it often uses the mist to cut between shots. Like, there's this thin barrier between like existence and just passing through it.
If I made a list of the top 5 transitions used in film this year, this movie would probably occupy at least like 3 of the slots. For me, the mist registered as Macbeth making all these like short-sighted decisions, and so he's kind of living in this haze where he can only like move on to the next visible thing that he needs to do to maintain his power.
It's kind of like what Lady Macbeth represents, where she's just saying, don't think about like the bigger picture, just see what's in front of you. The production design also reminded me of those early Hollywood films, like from the silent era into the 40s and 50s, with those massive sets that looked like they just went on kind of forever, and which were kind of barren in terms of the like detail or props in them. And I loved how that was brought to this film.
And the sort of surreal world that Joel Coen has created here actually highlights some of those aside moments where you just have one character monologuing, which is very weird to do on film, but it just feels like it works better here. Maybe there's something about the stagey design of the whole thing that helps that.
Yeah, I thought the monologuing worked really well, often due to the lighting, and of course, due to the performances.
It was easy to expect greatness from this performance, knowing that Denzel Washington's playing Macbeth, and yet he still manages to surpass expectations. He was absolutely magnificent here. Even in moments where I didn't understand what he was saying, I was actually really compelled by just how he was saying things.
I think my favorite moment of his was, again, after he committed the murders and you saw this real like vulnerability from him. I think that's so important to bring to the character because Macbeth is actually somebody who has a conscience and who is just betraying it, and it eats them alive. And by contrast, Lady Macbeth does not have the same conscience preventing her from committing these heinous acts. And Frances McDormand plays her very down to earth and not as like a psychopath or anything, which I thought was really important. There was this one moment where she was summoning the powers that would enable her to commit these sins. She bit her lip for a moment and I was like, oh yes, like that is so good. The thirstiness in that performance for the crown.
Frances McDormand was just fierce in this role. Both the actors, there's just so much to reap from every little facial expression on every second. This is definitely a Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand show, and those two performances really feel like they tower above everything else in the supporting realm. And Frances McDormand has less screen time than Denzel Washington for sure, but to me she does feel like a lead.
The performance could definitely pass for supporting, and if she wasn't Frances McDormand towering with 3 Oscars, I don't even think it would be a question of where to put her. But because she is Frances McDormand and she's like winning lead acting Oscars, and that's just her status, she could fit well into the lead category. But if she's campaigning lead, I wouldn't say she's a lock. If she's campaigning supporting, I think her chances are very good.
I mean, I'm definitely predicting her wherever they campaign her right now. Catherine Hunter as the 3 witches really stood out. Was there a better casting choice for this role? I don't think so. No. I mean, her voice is just deliciously maniacal. And the physicality of her performance was really odd.
Yeah, you could tell like she completely stole the scenes that she was in. I'm sure everybody seeing this film is going to be buzzing about her because it's such an odd performance that works just right. And it also gives this Coen brothers feel to the movie. She opens up the film and I was like, oh yeah, this does feel like a Coen brothers film because of the oddness, the quirkiness in that character.
Yeah, there were a couple side characters who were a little like quirky looking, and like just the casting, that's maybe the only tinge of Coen brother that I'm getting here. Corey Hawkins is getting some buzz too, and I liked him a lot, though I'm not really sure he stands out from the rest of the supporting cast because I thought a lot of people were really good. I'm not convinced, as maybe like Gold Derby or other people are, that he's getting nominated really.
I do not think anybody else besides McDormand and Washington would get nominated here.
Yeah, even Catherine Hunter, good as she is. And I guess while we're talking Oscars, I mean, cinematography, like, it could win. It's locked in. It's totally in.
And Bruno Delbonnel is very overdue for an Oscar win.
It'll be his 6th nomination without a win.
I think production design seems quite possible. While it's not over the top, it has a huge presence in the film, and sometimes the Academy Awards like to go that route where it's the best use of production design. I mean, it really shaped how you view the film. It also shaped the cinematography. It was very like intertwined. So I wouldn't be surprised if it got a production design nomination. I also thought the sound was great in this. I loved how they did the knocking. Like it was really brilliant. I don't think this is a lock for a sound nomination, but I don't think it's impossible. It's not the most sound nomination, and so that's why I'm more skeptical.
And shout out to Carter Burwell's score here, because I was seeing a lot of people sort of overlook it, and I do see how it oftentimes blends into the movie. But I did notice it at some times, and I really liked it, especially at the end credits. Whatever was playing over that, I was loving that.
There wasn't a moment where the score takes over and really shines. And I actually really like that. They really blended the score into the film. But the piece of music that played over the credits was awesome. Screenplay, I don't feel like this would get a nomination because it's literally just voting for Shakespeare.
Henry V was not nominated for screenplay, but it was nominated for director, worth noting. There's only been one Shakespeare adaptation that got a screenplay nomination. So you got to be careful when thinking about that. You know, they might think, oh, it's ripped straight from the page. Why would we nominate this?
I mean, if I'm in the position of a voter, I'm not going to throw my nomination to Shakespeare rather than to a new achievement by somebody who is currently living.
Very possible that this could get 2 lead acting nominations, cinematography, maybe another tech or 2. But does it miss Best Picture because Shakespeare isn't enough people's thing? What probably kept me from absolutely loving the movie was just that Shakespeare is not necessarily my thing. I will say I liked it probably about as much as I could ever like a Shakespeare adaptation. So I have like nothing but praise to give to this movie, and I really liked it. But there's a little bit of a taste thing going on here. So maybe it'll isolate people. I don't know if I can see it getting into Best Picture. I think it's just a maybe right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a highbrow movie. The language is hard to understand. Most people, unless you've studied the play, won't be understanding more than 50% of what's going on.
For that reason, I would also recommend you kind of refresh yourself on the story, because it's good to have a general knowledge of the events that happen in the movie so that you're not totally lost. But it is a good movie to be lost in, too. Like, I didn't really mind being too lost because the performances and the visuals were just enough for me. There was more than enough.
I wouldn't predict it for a nomination for Best Picture at this point, honestly.
I would have it like right on the outside, though.
The audience for this is by nature much smaller, given that it's a Shakespeare play.
I think there's a possibility there that Joel Coen gets nominated in director even if the movie misses picture, because he just did so much with the visuals here. People could respect him for going in a sort of new direction and honing his craft in a new way.
Maybe. I still have a harder time seeing that.
But we're absolutely recommending this movie.
I mean, I would recommend this movie if you think you're gonna like it. If you don't think you're gonna like it, then whatever.
But even as someone who feels meh about Shakespeare, like, I thought it was really worth seeing. And if you love Shakespeare, oh my god, you're gonna totally eat this up. You're gonna jizz. I give it an 8 out of 10.
I would also give it an 8 out of 10.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
Which character were you in your high school play?